right, so I'm going to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Scott Webster, who is apparently on a hiatus from cutting his hair for the next few weeks. Can't believe his wife hasn't gone in on that. So, Scott, thanks so much for joining us.
Glad to be here, Lee. Thanks.
Scott is the Chief Operating Officer at Claiborne. He is also the Director of our ACT and SAT programs. And there have been a number of questions, but I actually have a few that I've been asked ahead of time, and definitely one that's on top of my mind. So, Scott, tell me, why hasn't the ACT canceled the June test? What's going on here? Do they really think it's going to happen?
It's a great question, Lee. One can only speculate, but I think the writing is on the wall. The College Board made a fairly quick decision to just wait, right? Don't offer any tests while the coronavirus pandemic plays out. So August 29th is the earliest that students can take the SAT. The ACT, as their primary competitor, is, in my mind, playing the field. They're willing, perhaps it's unfair to say, risk the possibility of canceling June, but they've communicated that they won't make a decision until May 22nd, their cutoff for whether they'll push that test back to July or September. Basically, they're hoping, running the risk that it will be available, that in at least some test centers, students will be able to register and sit for that test.
Well, Scott, you were in a meeting on Monday with one of the ACT spokesperson. Did they allude to a take from home test? Is that going to be available at all this summer?
Another really important question that I was very eager to hear about. Short answer is no, which was quite surprising to me. We know that the College Board had been tinkering with online at-home test options. We know that those are available for the AP tests that are rolling out soon. But the ACT is still in R&D, so to speak. They communicated that June and July, whether they're happening or not, will be at test centers, and they will be administered via pencil and paper, the traditional formats. In September, they are able and eager to roll out online testing, but that is distinct from online at home. Online meaning if a test center has the capabilities of administering the test through an online platform, they will do so if students want to take it online, but not from their own home. That rollout is late fall, winter, according to the ACT spokesperson.
Great, thanks. I guess a couple follow-up questions to that, Scott. Because there's been so many delays and cancellations of tests, what are colleges doing to make sure that students have ample time to prepare? And yeah, what is a good prep timeline? You know, are admissions deadlines still the same? What do we see happening?
I'll try to answer that in two prongs. First, what is a good prep window for these standardized tests? Historically, at Claiborne, we've counseled families to plan for a prep process that takes anywhere from as short as 2 months to more consistently 3 to 4 months. Just the skill building required for the rigors of these standardized tests requires that length of time to do the repetition, the reflection, and the fine-tuning work, as opposed to a subject matter test that students may be more familiar with in school that is a very narrow unit of study. So 2 to 4 months would be the window that we normally recommend for an ideal prep window. In terms of what the ACT and the SAT are doing to support students as they navigate these delays, we know they're offering free resources. The College Board partnered years ago with Khan Academy and is offering online live classrooms for AP support. Khan Academy has a robust SAT module-based software. ACT is partnered with Kaplan, I believe, and they also have their own proprietary software called ACT Academy. So there are robust resources available through either testing entity.
Great. Thanks for that, Scott. So I guess sort of nail down, so we know what a prep window looked like. Given some of the inequities that we know are inherent now in them potentially offering virtual tests and maybe even just the ability for students to be able to prep this summer, how do we anticipate colleges adapting to this? Are they going to weight SAT and ACT the same?
To clarify your question, are you asking, are they going to weight the ACT differently from the SAT or just generally?
Sorry, either of the tests, are they going to weight them differently this year than they did last year?
Another really important question. I guess the jury's out, really. Individual schools are weighing their admission policies, and we know schools like the UC system, which have always been leery of the inequities implicit in standardized test formats, are moving more to the test optional policy. We know some Virginia state schools are evaluating. I think I read from the Fair Test website, which keeps a pretty careful eye on these developments. University of Virginia at Wise is temporarily removing SAT and ACT standardized testing requirements from this applicant year only, and then we'll evaluate in the future. It's hard to say. I will say that in the presence of essentially grade or GPA flattening, as students' academic years were disrupted, and perhaps grades don't tell the tale that they once did, at least for this year, SAT and ACT scores are still a differentiator, and it's why Rebecca alluded to subject tests as a way to present another data point that tells a compelling story to these universities and colleges. But the jury's out is the short.
All right, so let's just hit the nail on the head here, Scott. So, are the SAT and ACT a sinking ship? Are we gonna see them completely go away in the next application cycle?
So, though nothing is certain, I can pretty confidently say no. They simply are just too institutionally entrenched. It would be foolish, in my opinion, from an admissions perspective, to just dismiss the hundreds of thousands of data points that the College Board and the ACT respectively have accrued years, 50 years of data by which they can evaluate candidates. We do foresee, or I foresee, a rise in a number of schools questioning their admission policies and maybe moving to a more holistic evaluation model where they're more test flexible, test optional. But simply put, there aren't great alternatives if we're looking for a standardized benchmark by which to measure applicants. We know other tests are trying to move into this space. A plug here for the classical learning test, which is an online standardized test that's modeled after the classical educational model. But again, it just doesn't yet have the entrenched history, that massive database of information that the SAT and the ACT have at this point.
Excellent answer, Scott. And I think, we have data points on test optional because the test optional movement is not new, right? And we know that there's a difference. Test blind means they don't actually look at the test. Test optional comes with it usually some limitations. You have to fall within a certain GPA range, right, to qualify for not opting in for a test. So assuming that the test optional is a good way to go, how on earth do parents get their students motivated to take the SAT with so much uncertainty? I mean, I know we certainly have parents on right now that had their students were prepping for the March and May SATs, and now they've been delayed to August. So even if that weren't the case, how can parents motivate students to take an SAT if we don't even know for sure whether it's happening in person in August?
Another very intriguing question, right? How does one instill the drive and desire to uh, undertake a rigorous study process, which culminates in a 3.5 hour to 5 hour long multiple choice test? It is, even speaking as a tutor and as a test taker, it's not a walk in the park, even after an entire robust program of study. So I think the intrinsic motivation here that parents can communicate to students is, to put it delicately or not so delicately, what else are you doing right now? Right? Again, Rebecca alluded to this. Schools are going to evaluate how you utilize this unexpected and significant amount of free time. You have some school obligations, sure, good, do those. Show up to the online classes, submit your assignments, but in as little as 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week, on your own or working with a tutor maybe once a week, you can see significant gains in your composite score on either test over the course of a 2 to 3, 4 month program. And to me, that's a pretty strong value proposition. The return on investment is high. You can really differentiate yourself from a student who kind of just does what's necessary, but then no more.
That's great. And, I just to summarize what Scott said in these last couple of questions, and obviously he and I are biased because this is our industry, but if there is grade flattening and everyone decides to apply without a standardized test score, the applicant pool is very diluted, and it becomes very difficult as an admissions officer to be able to differentiate between students who have the academic rigor to be at the institution. And a standardized test score has and always will provide that benchmark. And because it is standardized across the US and internationally, it provides them with that data point. So again, unless there is some compelling reason, it sounds like they should be preparing for one or the other standardized test. And without resources, you still have Khan Academy and the ACT's Academy and their Kaplan partnership. So there are always those resources. Maybe to hit the nail on the head with Rosalind's question, one of the best ways to make sure that your kid is doing the work is they need some accountability measure. In an ideal world, parents would be able to distinguish between, here is me acting as your parent and here is me acting as your SAT coach, right? But that is very difficult to do, which is why many times parents will hire a tutor, is to make sure that their students are on track and accomplishing their goals. So again, it is still our recommendation that they take that standardized test to have that score, and then they can do with it whatever they want. All right. Okay. Comment coming in. All right. From Mary. Thanks so much for this. It is not statistically fair relative to other years when students could take either test a number of times. Right. So in previous years, if a student was able to take 3 or 4 tests back to back in a non-COVID atmosphere, they would be able to super score to a higher score than they would now. I guess Scott and I maybe could speak to this. These scores are scaled, and we anticipate that the SAT and the ACT are going to do their best to scale the score so that a student of similar SAT aptitude last year, this year would get the same score. And that is why they scale it. They try to make sure that they can limit those differences as much as possible. I can tell you it's probably going to be harder this year than any other year, but they're going to do their best to try to accommodate that. Yeah, again, it doesn't answer the question of being able to take it multiple times, right? That only helps within one score. So again, the College Board has announced that a test every month until the regular admissions deadline, which is February. So they've announced in August, September, October, November, December. I suspect they might add a January test in there so that it's possible to get a test in before February 1st regular admissions deadlines. But again, it's a completely different atmosphere. And if they do take from home, that's just another data point. So,
and Lee, if I could chime in.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
On the other side of the testing spectrum, the ACT, again, is making a play here, because if you were anticipating taking the SAT in the spring and you can't now until the fall, ACT is, waving there in the background saying, hey, look, you could take it June, July, even before there's an administration in August. Furthermore, they are offering individual section retesting come September. The only prerequisite is that you've taken the ACT, the full length ACT once previously, and that could be from years prior. That could be a way to smooth out a rockier performance in any one individual test setting. So interesting, certainly a marketing position that they're taking, but could be a compelling case for the ACT. We will see.
Yeah, good point, Scott. And maybe you can just give us a quick 1-minute overview. What does the transition from SAT to ACT look like? Which students would it favor, and how difficult is that transition?
It's a somewhat nuanced question and very much individualized, but we can take some broad strokes here. So effectively, the ACT is more straightforward. It's more aligned conceptually with what students encounter in schools, but it moves faster. So typically, a student who is able to read quickly, comprehend quickly is going to do well there. Another major distinction is that there is one section of the ACT that's devoted to math, whereas the SAT has 2 sections. So it's effectively half as important on the ACT. So some students who are leery of their math performance or not very confident in their mathematical intuition and analytical reasoning skills may lean to the ACT, provided, final factor, they're able to navigate the rigors of a timed science section, which is again on the ACT. Which is effectively speed data interpretation, not a typical skill that is taught in schools or anywhere else, but it is something that with practice and especially with guidance from a coach, students can get their minds around.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for that, Scott. By the way, you're getting props for upping your background game. So don't think your background goes unnoticed. So awesome. Great props for that. So yeah, a lot of great comments coming in. Pam said, assuming scores aren't perfect, how does a student decide whether or not to submit when test scores are optional? Should they submit if a score is within a particular school's 25th to 75th percentile range? Would they only submit it at the top of the range? Would they submit an okay score? So yeah, I think that there's a lot of questions surrounding that. So Scott, any thoughts? Looks like I might have lost him there for just a second. Okay, he's back. All right, great. I'm guessing.
My apologies, had an environmental disruption, which is often the case when you have 3 children under the age of 7 running around. Bring your kids to work day every day.
Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, could you reiterate the question?
Yeah, sure. I'm sure you had an adorable one of your blonde children on your lap asking what she could do. So, Pam basically just asked, in this sort of environment, how would a student know when to submit their scores? So we're encouraging them, take the test. how do they know whether to take it? We know what the standard 25th to 75th percentile ranges are. Those are obviously based on a completely different reality than we are now. So can you give any advice to parents and students on when they should submit a score?
So again, thankfully, you are not required to automatically submit to schools. That's only during registration that you have the option to select up to 4 institutions to which you send scores automatically without even seeing results. Don't do that. In terms of once you've received scores, which now is a pretty quick turnaround, 10 days is the average. I would say based on your school list, the profile of schools that you are hoping to attend, if your scores are somewhere near the 50th percentile in the middle range, and you can find this information online very easily, search the school admissions page, it'll be readily available, then it's worth submitting. Again, we don't know exactly how schools will respond to coronavirus, but they do need enrollment to continue to exist. So if you're scoring about average for that institution, I'd say it's worth submitting. And then you can always communicate, again, advocate for yourself, communicate with an admissions representative and ask, I took this test, here are my scores, do you think I should take this again? What can I do to go to this institution? It looks well.
Yeah, right. Like even if you're at the 25th percentile mark and their applicant pool is filled with students who don't have any scores, maybe you're a known quantity, and even if you're at the 25th percentile, you're more likely to get in. So again, I'm just speculating there, but that could be a point. Dawn brought up a really great point, and one that I forget when I mentioned that they have a test every month. Something really bizarre is that the SAT, the September and August tests are only a week apart, which is different. When they schedule these tests normally, they're usually a month apart to give students time to prep. Most of the time they get the scores back. What's the logic there, Scott? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is intriguing. It's certainly a departure from the status quo, where at most they were offering 3 tests in a given academic semester. So spring, you had March, May, June, then you had the summer test in August, and then in the fall, you of course had October, November, December. Honestly, I think they're just trying to play catch up. They want to give students as many opportunities as possible to take and retake these tests because they're playing catch up. There's probably a more nuanced answer. But.
Well, actually, PJ's question actually gave me a thought. So he said, do we expect there to be a run on SAT registrations when it opens up on the 26th of this month? And I just thought, given the social distancing factors that might be in play, I wonder if they're planning on only being able to fill maybe 50% of the seats for the August test, and they're going to bump the rest of the registrations into the September test. So maybe with them that close, that's their way of sort of overflowing into another test date. So I'm speculating here, but that certainly could be an explanation. Scott, do we have any recommendations? If you're even thinking about taking the SAT, should you just register, be waiting on that click button on May 26th to register?
Yeah, I think so. Don't be caught just sitting on your hands and frantically trying to register for tests that are no longer available. Even some families may want to consider the ACT again, even if all other indicators pointed to the SAT previously. The status quo has been disrupted, perhaps permanently. So we'd say advocate, don't wait, move forward, register early. You can always shift your registration. We know that these test institutions have been fairly forgiving in terms of a cancellation and refunding and giving students options.
Yeah. Great, awesome. Well, Scott, thanks so much. I think in closing, one thing Scott and I discussed before this is, um, you know, it was kind of curious that the College Board and the ACT didn't hurry up and rush their take-home tests. Again, we think maybe they know something we don't, and they feel confident that these tests will endure, and so they don't think that colleges are going to permanently find another solution. So, our advice is register for the test, register for an ACT or an SAT or both. And then you can always decide to send your scores in or not send your scores in, but at least you have that data point to be able to act on. If you have any questions, you can contact us at claiborne.com. Look us up on the web, like our Facebook posts, where there's lots of experts at Claiborne willing to help you. And we just want to thank everyone for watching. Really appreciate all of the questions and comments. We'll make this video available on our social channels. We are going to plan to have another one of these events in 2 weeks. We've had great feedback on it. Don't forget to like our page. We appreciate your support. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention our promotion. We're running a May promotion right now. You get your first session free and 20% off all college admissions packages. That's SAT, ACT, and college counseling. So from everyone here at Claiborne, Test Prep and Tutoring, we ask that you be safe and you be well. Thank you.